review or recordings in progress. There we go.
Sorry about
And thank you to all of you. It's okay. Thank you to all of you for giving me another chance and coming back. And of course, Dave, thank you as well for the invitation and for being so welcoming to me. I love this stuff, right? This is great. Come together as a community and share a few tidbits. So, I'm going to start sharing my screen. And before I start sharing the PowerPoint, I did let Karen know that, and Dave, that they're very welcome to record this and share it with the Georgia TESOL community, if that helps. I also have the PowerPoint that I'll be sending after the presentation, and I'll send it as a PowerPoint, not as a PDF. I'll send it as a PowerPoint in case anyone would want to teach from it. This is a nuts and bolts presentation, and there are no secrets here. So I do hope that you get to use the information in a way that you get it into the hands of your teachers and your colleagues. All righty, so let's start from the beginning. Now, when I start doing this, I don't see you anymore. So I am going to say, hey, if you have a question, just jump in. There's only 25 or so of us, so just unmute yourself and jump in with a question, okay? Okay, supporting adult English language learners, resources for students, educators, service providers, and families. Wow, everybody. All right. So as Karen shared, I was in the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education. I spent my last roughly 10 years in the U.S. Department of Education. And when I joined the U.S. Department of Education, I joined as what's called the English Language Specialist for OCTE, the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education. And I did that work for about 5 years, where I ran national teacher education projects using federal funds. The federal funds came from mostly the national literacy activities, also through the WIOA mandate, Workforce Innovation Opportunity Acts, and also through the Perkins mandate. So those were the different kinds of funding streams. After a while, as Karen shared, kind of stepped out of that role. I moved laterally and then I moved up. And once I did that, I started working across federal agencies a lot more. And so I started working with USCIS, United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. I started to do some work with the Department of Labor, and I started to become aware of the Consumer Protection Bureaus, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau agency. So, and I think I messed up that name. Sorry about that. The point is, I learned an awful lot. I really, when I joined the government, I was at that point, I had been a teacher, an adult ed teacher. I worked in an IELP. I was a university professor. I really didn't know the wealth of resources that are in the federal government. And I didn't understand how you could find resources related to English language teaching in many places. We always think of the Department of Ed, but who else? But who would think of the Department of Labor or CFPB, etc.? So when Karen invited me to talk and shared with me the purpose of these sessions, it seemed like a great place just to get nuts and bolts and get materials in folks' hands. So that's what I'm talking about, federal resources in particular. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. That would be lovely. Here is my URL. Okay. Now, adult education contexts. I might be preaching to the choir here. I recognize some names, but let's talk about what we mean by the adult education context. Let me do a time check. Okay. So adult education. So we have our traditional adult education, which includes basic skills, helping adults with English proficiency. If they dropped out of school post the age of 16, we help them get their their secondary school completion, maybe their GED. For older learners, we help them in their workplace skills, and we help them to transition from post-secondary education, post-secondary education to work. As many of you probably know, the younger adult ed learner is growing. In other words, well, first, let me back up for a minute. English language learners, that is the largest population of our adult ed students. That's the first thing. Second thing is there is a trend to the learners, the adult learners being younger. And why is that? We're seeing younger learners, by younger, I mean 16 to 18, 16 to 19, come into our adult education programs because they're dropping out of high school. And they have very different needs than, say, the 35-year-old who came from an immigrant who came from another country, skilled or unskilled. So we have that mixed bag. But when we're talking about adult education context, is our traditional education context, or we'll have to figure out another word than traditional, but there it is, okay? And then, of course, there's the adult English language development. There's career pathways and technical education where English language development is part of that, even if it isn't the front and center. Of course, when we talk about literacy education, adult education, there's literacy education that's related to family literacy as well. There is civics education, distinct from citizenship, but civics education. How do we help our immigrants and our refugees, our adult learners, to learn about civic engagement, coming from countries and contexts where it's very, very different? So civics education, and at least with WIOA, Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, EL is part of civics education. So EL, civics education. Don't forget, we have correctional education. We have English language development within correctional education. And then, of course, English language development for immigrants and refugees, these holistic strategies, but then there's all holistic services, but then we have ELD in that context as well. And then, of course, citizenship education, helping adults to pass the citizenship test. One thing that we see throughout many of our adult education contexts, we see some challenges. We'll talk a little bit more. But very often, the topics of basic skills or workplace skills or even civics education, very often topics of teaching, learning, curriculum development, program administration are not tailored to adults. We know this. They're not tailored to adult learners. They're not necessarily tailored to adult teachers, teachers of adult learners, or our context. So I would like you, please, to put in the chat. Let's get a feel for who's here. And if you can just put in the chat and say, what context do you work in? Based on what I said, traditional adult ed, English language development. So let's just take a look at the chat. And if you can please share what context you're in, and perhaps more than one. Hi, Joy. You could probably give this presentation.
That's very nice of you to say. No, I couldn't, but hi. Thanks for doing this.
It's wonderful to see you.
Wonderful to see you too.
So we have some folks, traditional adult ed. Oh, I have volunteered and observed immigrant and refugee community. Great. Another person, literacy education, career pathways. Okay. High school newcomers. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. ELD, traditional adult refugee, a volunteer. Thank you for saying about that, focusing on that. Refugee adult ed. This is great. So happy to see all you. All right. Nice feel for who's in the room. All right. So let's move on. What is your role within your program? So you just shared with us in the chat box what your context is, traditional. What is your role? Are you a teacher? Are you a program administrator? Both? Some of you have already said volunteer. Maybe you're a volunteer teacher. Are you a teacher trainer? Do you develop materials? Okay, I see. Teacher, administrator, teacher, ELD teacher. Anybody a grant writer, materials developer? Teacher, okay. parent facilities, teacher, somewhat program administrator. Third space, you're working in the third space. The third space is that additional space where we don't get credit. We're doing all the work. Teacher trainer, we have 2 books for teachers on academic reading and writing. Joy, put them in the chat box for us. I'm sure everybody would love to see the title of your book. Parent resource specialist. All right, that's a good one. Parent resource specialist. Thanks for sharing that one. I'm actually, one of the things I'm doing is creating a program and designing training for multilingual family coordinators. That's a great, Alfredo, there are tons of resources. Connect with me separately. I can give you more resources that would help you as you engage with families. I'm going to put my email in the chat box. So families are a little bit beyond this presentation, but I have a ton of resources I can share with you if you're interested. Target after grad school's teacher. Okay, that's what you're aiming to do. So we fill many roles. We've already seen teacher, program administrator, and volunteer as well, materials developer, all of us, many roles in adult education, K-12 as well, but certainly in the adult ed space. Let's talk more about some challenges. You can probably put more than what I have listed here. But let's talk about this. So some challenges in adult education. Big one. Are there full-time jobs? Are there full-time jobs with benefits? And we are certainly seeing programs close in the IELP space, the ELP space. By the way, as we're seeing is a trend, as we're seeing university programs that had been traditionally focused on international students who are seeking to develop their English language skills so they can study in colleges, in the college and university, they're hurting, they're closing. Guess where they're looking for their next student population? They're looking to this space. And so they're looking to serve, well, we are not really getting our international students like we used to for lots of reasons. Let's take a look around the corner. Who can we serve? So I'm just going to make you aware of that. Those of you who are in the space right now, maybe you can begin partnering. Maybe you can reach out to a hurting IELP or ELP. Side context. All right. Full-time job with benefits. We go to school, we get our master's degrees, and we'd like to be able to have a living wage. But it's hard when funding fluctuates. What are some of the other challenges that we see in adult education contexts? There is very limited in-service, often limited in-service professional development. Also, very few pre-service teacher education programs include adult education. Very few. When I was doing my master's degree, I did it up in SUNY Albany, and we could choose to do one of 2 tracks, the K-12 track or the adult education track. And I did do the adult education track, but it was the same track. Everything was the same for K-12, except when it came to our student teaching. And so I was a student teacher in adult ed context. As a professor, where I've served in different universities, we did similarly. We had the K-12 track, and we had the adult education track. And don't mind sharing with you, we really didn't develop the adult ed track as perhaps we could have. So that has implications. So we have folks who are coming into the field, into our programs, our adult ed programs, who were like, I'll just make the K-12 stuff fit. And it doesn't, right? We know that. We do our best. Okay, other challenges, resources of time. Do we get preparation time? Are we only paid for the hour and a half that we teach? Do we get paid for prep time? What about materials? What are we working from? Are we forcing materials to work with students for unintended purposes? I don't mind sharing with you. Back in the day, 25 years ago, this is terrible. Maybe I shouldn't say this on a recorded line, but I'll say it anyway. We used the TOEFL test as a placement test because we didn't have, yeah, I know. I see Dave holding his head. And it was a long time ago, 25, maybe even 28 years ago. But the point is that adult ed programs struggle and they suffer and they make do with what they can. And sometimes the decisions are not the best decisions. For example, using TOEFL as a placement into your courses. And then, of course, there's funding and the funding sources. We can be getting funding depending on the state we're in. We might be getting funding from the State Department of Education or the State Department of Labor. That this could be federal monies that are channeled through the state offices, or we could be getting money from grants as well. And with all of this, we have fluctuating teacher readiness. So I'd like you to please, this is off the top of my head from having been in the field. These are some of the challenges for adult education context. I would like to invite you to please put in the chat other challenges you've seen. Before you type, please take note that Joy has put in the chat her textbooks that she's coming out with. Wow, these are great. Preparing adult English learners to read for college and workplace. Very good. Great, great, great. Thank you. So if you can please begin to add to this list that we have, what are some of the other challenges that you work with every day? Those of you who are volunteers, are you getting the support you need? Are you just kind of tossed in there? Okay, nobody's putting anything in the chat. That's okay. Maybe we don't want to focus on the negative stuff. Let's get to the positive. Let's get to the resources that are going to help us. So I'm going to share with you some resources, but the focus is on federal resources, but I just want to remind you in case of some associations. So TESOL, of course, TESOL International. We have communities of practice, and when you get the PowerPoint, you'll have the links to all of these resources. TESOL International, we have communities of practice. For example, we have the Adult Education Intersection, which has been often the largest IS and very active. I must say that the Adult Ed IS could use some help right now. During COVID, leaders had difficulty, as so many of us did. And so the Adult Ed IS had some challenges, and they have been rebuilding and regrouping for the past 2 to 3 years. But if any of you were interested in getting involved in TESOL and the adult education space, this is definitely a place where we need you and where you could have an impact and also where you could learn. TESOL has self-study courses on adult ed. We have the 6 principles that we've put out, and there is a 6 principles version focused on adult education and workforce. We have advocacy events. In fact, I think that's Karen, where you and I finally met face to face, was at the advocacy event. And then we just clicked. So I've mentioned the WIOA, I've mentioned the Perkins. I see your heart there. Thanks, Karen. And the Perkins. So when we go on the Hill and we try to advocate for resources in the adult ed space, we're talking about those programs that directly will provide funding for us. Okay. But just in case you don't know about it, I want to share with you COABE, the Coalition for Adult Basic Education. If you're not already familiar with that, there is an association, they have a conference, they have journals. Connect with them if you haven't already. Then there's also an association, LESLA, Literacy, Learning, and Second Language Education for Adults. I think, Joy, you've been really involved in that. That's been around not that long in comparison, maybe 15 years. Joy, did you want to come off mute and say something about LESLA?
No, I think it is about 15 years, and they're very active and doing wonderful things and have an annual conference with a publication following it. So it's worth following. Thanks for mentioning that.
Yep, absolutely. So those are some of the associations, good places to start if you're looking for help. Okay, federal agencies, though, that is the main topic. And what I have done for all of you is I have gone through and I have curated resources from the U.S. Department of Education, USCIS, U.S. Consumer Protection Bureau, and I think there should be an A agency, and U.S. Department of Labor. Most of the work I'm going to share with you, though, is from the U.S. Department of Ed and USCIS. So let me share a little bit about what we mean by federal resources. What I mean by federal resources that I'm sharing with you. Number one, they're freely available. They're online. Now, in some instances, in a few instances, there might be a few for which you would need to pay. But for the majority, and that's with USCIS, but for the majority that I'm sharing with you, I'm going to say 95% freely available. We paid for them already. We paid for them with our tax dollars. So they're not free, but they're paid for with our tax dollars. They're good stuff, evidence-based, federally funded, created by experts in the field. So as you learn about these sort resources, you're going to see easily recognizable names of companies: American Institutes for Research, Center for Applied Linguistics, World Education. And if you go and look at those materials, which I'm guessing you will recognize the names of the people who have been creating these. So they were hired as subject matter experts by one of those companies, and you'll see names that you recognize. This is good stuff. Many of them are available on the agency's own platforms. So some of them you go to a link, you'll download a PDF, but there are a couple of really good platforms which I'll be sharing with you. Now, most of these are teacher focused, meaning that most of these materials are intended for teachers and teacher trainers. It's only recently, and by recently, maybe 5 to 7 years, that we're seeing more and more student focused. And I'll tell you why. But at least what happened was federal agencies were creating early enough materials for students, and there were complaints, strong complaints from developers saying, hey, you are in our commercial space, and federal agencies are not supposed to compete, right? We just don't. So so a lot more was focused on teacher education, teacher development. But having said that, we are seeing more student-focused materials. In other words, materials that you can put in the hands of your learners, which is a good thing. The other thing about federally funded resources is they have great sites, and they are continuously updating their materials as they are federally mandated. They just don't do this. They have to be mandated by one of the laws that that the agency is administering. But they're continuously updated, and quite frequently the old stuff stays up there, and they will go through and clean out the closet. I had to do some closet cleaning. That was literally what I did. I cleaned the closet. I took out the culottes, and I took out, the wedgie sandals, but I left a lot of the other stuff. So we can feel good. One of my point is we can feel good about the materials that we're getting from federal funded resources because of these reasons. All right. Oh, all right. Again, please just come off mute and interrupt me if you have anything that you want to share. Let's start with the U.S. Department of Education. And often the U.S. Department of Education, we head toward the Office of English Language Acquisition, right? That's K-12. And they're great. I love them. Office of English Language Acquisition, they get monies. But typically their focus is because of the law that they are administering, their place in our space is K-12, but also family engagement, parental engagement, K-12 or pre-K-12. We don't think of the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education quite frequently when we're looking at the U.S. Department of Education. But that's going to change after today. So materials from the U.S. Department of Education, most of the materials focus on teachers helping us. There are also materials for Train the Trainer, which we can use for Train the Trainer. There are materials for program administrators, but then because we don't fit into these neat boxes. In fact, I should probably change this slide because we don't fit into these. We just don't. We're teachers and we're program administrators. We're program administrators and we train the trainers. So we do many of these things. A lot of these resources have been created with that in mind. So it might say for teachers, but once you get into the resource, you're like, actually, depending on the hat I'm wearing, I could use this in different ways. And then, of course, more recently, we have materials for the actual end user, the learner. All right. Are you ready? Hold on to your hats. Hold on to your seat because we're going to go fast. Okay. This is the main repository links that I'm sharing with you. This is again, U.S. Department of Education, Office of Career Technical and Adult Education. And a good 5 or 6 years of my life was spent here. And there were great people working on this before I got there. And there are great people working on this since I have left. Great people doing this work. So what is the work? Links is the main repository for so much of this work geared for adult learners and teachers of adult learners through the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So this is primarily for adult education context, as we talked about, but also will include, to a certain extent, community colleges as well. Okay. Literacy so think about all those needs that we said. U.S. Department of Education understands those needs, understands that you might have an adult ed program that's highly organized and it's been around for many, many years and they have funding. But you know what? Just as important are those literacy programs in the library, in the corner of the library, et cetera. So we're trying to attend to many of those needs. So links has many different kinds of resources. They have the community of practice. They have self-paced online courses. Now, the self-paced online courses can be self-paced, so you as a teacher can go in and have a ball. You as a program administrator can go in and even use them to put together a training packet for your people. Do you have volunteers coming who have wonderful, kind hearts? And maybe they just retired from a job, doing IT, and they're native speakers of English and now they want to teach English, right? All those, that's great. But what about teaching them the basics of language acquisition? What about teaching them the basic strategies? Do you have to create all that? Well, you can use the materials here. So these self-paced online courses can be used individually by all of us to go on, have a ball and play around. But you can also go through these courses and create a little training program. You don't have to design it because it's here. All you have to do is figure out which courses you want your volunteers to take or your newer teachers to take. And there within each resource, within most of the resources, they tell you how to do that, how to adapt for your context. There's also resources, and here what we mean by resources would be PDFs, toolkits. There are lots of toolkits, PDFs of toolkits, PDFs of research studies, PDFs of case studies, right? And then, of course, we have the Learning Center. So let's take a look at, just to give you a flavor, all right? I curated this. I went through and you're just getting a flavor. So what are some of the materials that are really jumping out at us right now? So for teachers, the Integrated Education and Training Design Toolkit, Train the Trainer resources, and again, I have all the links for you, the Remote ESOL project, and then finally, a project on blended learning. So let's take a look at this toolkit first. The Integrated Education and Training Design Toolkit is an absolutely fabulous resource, because in this resource it talks a little bit about the research behind IET. It talks about the strategies behind IET, and it has a little webinar that goes along with it that will explain it. And it's intended to help programs, but teachers within those programs. So this is a wonderful resource and a great place to start. And you can Sorry, that keeps advancing. And as you can see, this particular resource was created by AIR, American Institute for Research, along with a small business, which is SAFAIL Partners. Let's talk about the Remote ESOL project. So the U.S. Department of Ed And I don't work for them anymore, by the way. I haven't worked for them now for 2 years. So I should have said that in the very beginning. So I'm free. I'm free to say things. I'm free to talk about this. I am not speaking on behalf of the Department of Ed. Karen, maybe we can put that up front. I am not speaking on behalf of the Department of Ed. I'm speaking about this as an end user, just like you. So the remote ESOL project, when we started to move online because of the pandemic, the U.S. Department of Ed was there and they started to look at remote learning. And so as you can see here, this was actually put together with the Department of Ed and World Education. Okay. And this is for all sorts of folks who want to learn more about, how can we put adult learning online successfully. There's a webinar that goes with it. There are case studies if you're interested in learning about case studies. They have lessons learned. So there's just so much here for a challenge that so many of us faced. Now, I guess it's up to you to decide if this is still relevant. I think that what I'm seeing is that even though we're back to face, that we're still hybrid, and that this remote is not gone away. It's not like, well, we're back face to face. We don't need to know remote anymore. That doesn't seem to be the case. In fact, we're now hybrid and taking the advantages of having remote sections of our program for lots of reasons, for the students, for the teachers, for parents who are trying to learn but need to be at home with their kids. So this is a great resource that can help you. Okay. Again, a little bit more information there. Oops. I think for some reason, my mouse is very sensitive, maybe because I'm trying to go so quickly. So let me go back. There we go. I don't know why it's doing that. I'm so sorry. Let me get my PowerPoint back. There we go. Okay. So are you all seeing the blended learning for adult basic learners? Okay. Okay, good. Thanks. So this is, again, another resource. You probably recognize the names. For example, David Rosen has been in the field for 1,000,000 years. Sorry, David, I don't mean to suggest, if you're listening to this, I don't mean to suggest you're 1,000,000 years old. But you are definitely a leader in the field. So blended learning for adult basic skills learners is a nice overview that would help anyone better understand what it is we're doing in adult basic education. And again, there are course materials, there are case studies, there are webinars to go with the material. All right. Sorry I'm speaking so quickly. I have a lot of stuff to share with all of you. All right, so some links, materials for program managers. Now this, I'm not going to go through each one individually, but you will see again, compendium of innovative practices for adult bridge programs and IET, adult education strategies for building effectiveness, designing and delivering career pathways at community colleges. No one here said that they're in community colleges that I saw, but I'm guessing some of the folks who will watch this recording are. All right. So I want to talk about community. So far I have shared with you kind of the static resources. Go in, get your PDF, read the materials, adapt it to your context. But what about community? What about talking to each other? This is so important. Links has a community which will connect all of us together. And by the way, you will need to, as a professional, you will need to create an account. It's free. You will need to create an account, but don't worry, it's not collecting real private information. I think it's real basic stuff. It's a federal, website, so they're not going to collect stuff like that. But you do need to create an account in order to access all this good stuff. So one of the things that they provide for us is this community, a community of adult educators. And the community will have, as it says there, it will have asynchronous as well as synchronous events. when I was working there, we would bring in speakers from we'd have webinars, we'd bring in speakers. It was great. But we would just put up something where maybe we put up a resource and we say, okay, everybody read this. And then we would chat. Okay, here's a webinar. Everybody watch the webinar, and we would chat. Just to give you a feel, here are some upcoming announcements. Well, ones on the left are kind of done for, but it gives you a feel. We had Links had a community event, Advanced IET Design Camp, informational webinar, celebrating AEF. I'm used to calling it AFLA Week, AEFL Week, Adult Ed Family Literacy Week. But what's coming up? Artificial intelligence for the adult English language learner. Take a look at that on the right-hand side. We have that coming up. We also have other events that are coming up. There's an event on media, how to work with media. Just so you know, let me go back for a minute. Does anybody know Susan Finn Miller? Susan Finn Miller. She's another wonderful, wonderful joy. Yeah, thumbs up. Susan Finn Miller is one of our moderators for one of our communities of practice. So good stuff, good people. We have discussion groups. Now, you and I are all focused on English language development within these contexts, but not all adult education teachers are focused on English language acquisition. So you can see here, we have lots of discussion groups, where they have lots of discussion groups, career pathways, corrections, professional development, etc. And then there's also a specific discussion group that is geared toward English language acquisition. So you know that anything in that discussion group is going to be related to English language development, English language proficiency development. But that's not to say that there isn't going to be a thread about English language development in any one of the other discussion groups. So play around, join, listen, pay attention, and see what is going on, because we can learn an awful lot from our colleagues our adult education colleagues in these other discussion groups. Okay, so to give you a feel for the English language acquisition section, so there are discussions, as it says there on the left-hand side, discussions, bulletins, documents, events, and then of course it's a platform, so Links is a platform and you can search through it. Are you excited about Links? Okay, yay, yay, yay. Okay, great. There's so much, and I'm only giving you a feel. Let's talk about the online courses. As I've said, the online courses are self-paced, but most of, at least the English language development online courses, are trying their best to address all of those challenges that we shared. Sometimes we have teachers who have master's degrees and experience, but a lot of times we have teachers who are new to the field, right? It's because, maybe they're part-timers. Sometimes we have folks who are volunteers. They're highly educated, but in other fields, and now they want to teach English for their own personal reasons. So we have teachers who are at all different places in their development and their knowledge. We have program administrators who are wearing so many different hats. And so sometimes, as I've said, sometimes they want to provide instruction, but how can they also create materials to train their folks? So the online courses are self-paced. You can go in, you can choose them. Some of the courses, though, also attend to that need of the program administrator, to provide some sort of, I don't want to say standardized content, but some sort of content where there's something that they'd like every teacher to know. They would like every teacher to know a little bit about this or a little bit about that. So for some of these courses, you can actually have your folks sign up and they'll get a certificate at the end. Have they completed it? So that would be your chance as a program administrator to say, take these courses, please, and get your certificate at the end, certificate of completion. So you have to really work with these to see how these courses can meet individual needs as well as programmatic needs. Okay. This is a feel for these adult education courses. Again, I put the arrow there, the English language acquisition courses. But look at all of the others. Are you in a program? And I saw somebody, at least one, say that they're in a program helping immigrants and refugees. Well, maybe you want to also help them with diversity, equity, inclusion, DEIA, to understand that as a content. We all need to understand DEIA content if we're in the workplace, right? But often immigrants and refugees haven't had that, or if they've had it, it's a different thing. So teaching DEIA as content is so extraordinarily important for our immigrants and refugees, right? Okay. And then technology, learners with disabilities, just to give you a feel. I'm not going to read all of this to you, but some of these were my babies back in the day, and they've been revised and updated. The culottes have been taken out, the platform shoes have been taken out, and they've been updated. But in English language acquisition, you'll find suites of materials. So for example, there's the adults, learners, basic principles and practices, and then 3 modules, meeting the needs of today's learners. Next is digital literacy. And next is preparing for work and career pathways. Now, in this suite of resources, each module has an online course, webinar, has a brief that gives a little bit of background on sort of the basic research, the foundational research into those ideas, and then a compendium of teacher resources as well. Nice stuff. Okay, here we have content standards for English language learners. Again, that might be helpful for programs as well as individual teachers. The different modules that can help us look at that as well. All right, I did want to talk about the Learner Center. This is only within the past maybe 7 years or so. And this is what you can provide to your students. Now, for the Links Learner Center, you don't need to create a login. It's accessible. And I love that they did that, because a lot of times our learners might be worried about creating a login and putting their name into something that's in the federal government. So this is really easily accessible. And here you have, just the homepage there for the adult learners. And these are the areas that they can work on. Some of this is in Spanish. I think that's the only alternative language that we have. I do believe so. But you can see there the topics, and you can play around with that. And as the teacher putting material into their hands, you can figure out how to adapt that to your context as well. Okay, deep breath. Next one. Let's move on to, so that was links, all right? Too much to go into here, but it's been created with all of our challenges in mind. Please do take a look. USCIS. So, sometimes they're kind of the baddies, immigration and so forth. Certainly we don't, but what is a great division is Citizenship and Immigration Services. And if you don't, how many of you do know about Citizenship and USCIS? Thumbs up if you already know about. Okay, I see Dave raising his hand. Couple of heads going back and forth. Okay, USCIS, it is a wonderful resource. USCIS does focus not only on teachers and training the teachers and program administrators, but they have materials that go into the hands of the students. Primarily, they're focused on helping us to help our students study and pass the citizenship test. The starting point is uscis.gov, and the most important website for us is the educational programs. So resources for educational programs. There are materials that will help prepare the students for the interview and the test. They create products for educators and program administrators, and they're beautiful. Let me tell you right now, I wish I had more time. These are beautiful resources. And they do teacher trainings. They have great people who work in this office. I mean, really great people. I've known them for years, and they are ELT teachers at heart. They are. And so the folks who develop the resources will come to your area. I don't want to say they'll come to your school necessarily, but they will come to your area, and they will do a training with you on how to use their resources. They will train you. They will train your teachers. Please reach out to them and find out when a training is going to be held in your state. When I was at the White House, we actually put together a training in Georgia, and we were in Gwinnett, I want to say Gwinnett County, and we worked with USCIS, and we worked the Gwinnett Library. The point is, they will do this. This is federally funded, paid for with our tax dollars. I also know that I recommended this to Alabama, Mississippi, TESOL. I was meeting with them once several years ago, and I mentioned this program to them, and I said, contact them, invite them to your state conference. And they did, and they went, and they had a USCIS sent trainers down for the conference to help teachers learn how to use these resources. So Georgia TESOL, contact me through email directly if you need me to tell you the names of the folks, but you should be able to find the name of the folks online. They will come and do that for you. This is just a list of some of the kinds of materials that you'll see. So 2 generational approaches to citizenship education. Again, you have experts in the field providing the development here. How to teach the N400. Okay. Lesson plans, great lesson plans, beautiful lesson plans. And if you see at the bottom of the screen, this is 1 to 10 of 82. So there's a lot. Okay. What else would we find that I would definitely say to look at? The USCIS Adult Citizenship Education Program Development Guide. All right, and there it is. The Guide to Adult Citizenship Education Content Standards and Foundational Skills. You get the PowerPoint. Please don't try to write it down. A framework for developing a comprehensive curriculum. Adult Citizenship Education Strategies for who? Volunteers. Okay, so that is USCIS in a nutshell. Now, I knew I'd run out of time. And I'm just about, so U.S. Department of Labor, how'd they get into the mix? Okay. So Department of Labor has kind of always been a partner with adult education because it makes sense, right? I mean, U.S. Department of Education. And it makes sense because they're training workforce. And depending on the state you're in, sometimes your monies will come through. Sometimes your adult education monies will come through the Department of Ed, but sometimes your monies will come through the Department of Labor. And that's the case where I live. I live in Maryland. Our adult education monies come through the Department of Labor. I don't know how it works in Georgia. But putting that aside, the U.S. Department of Labor has adult training programs, and that is just one website that I'm sharing, a good place for you to start. Who knew the U.S. Consumer Protection Bureau has incredible materials for our adult immigrant and refugee learners, our multilingual learners. Guess who created these materials back in the day? It was Center for Applied Linguistics, Debra Kennedy. You must know Debra Kennedy, right? Okay, so take a look at CFPB and you'll see materials for helping our adult learners. What does it mean to get credit? What does it mean to open up bank accounts? What does it mean to try and stay away from scam and fraud? And as you can see here, part of the material, the resources are for, see the resource for the people we serve? Look at that all the way to the right, multilingual communities and newcomers. Great stuff. And then you can go to that website and you will find material specifically for the learner, the end user. Nice stuff. And you can, some of it has lesson plans, some of it you can just go to and begin to create your own lesson plans. But who knew? And there it is. All right. That's a lot. And so I hope that it was interesting and at least sort of wets your whistle. And I'm going to stop sharing and open it up to comments, questions, thoughts, insights. And I'm going to get a drink of water.
Dr. Suarez, thank you so much for all the information. It's amazing what's available for adult education. Excited to see it. Because you're right, we're not taught a lot about what's going on in adult ed. I think I saw David had a question in the chat. Have you heard of adult learners working with learners using Link's Learner Center? I.e., are they they use the Links Learner Center for assignments or tasks.
Yes, absolutely. And because these programs are used in different ways, they are used standalone, but they're also used by programs. And we do get, I should stop saying we, I'm no longer with them, but so they get surveys and feedback. And at the end of each of the courses, there will be surveys. And, you know, and they get really good feedback. But I think, as you can imagine, sometimes the feedback tends to be that, well, it's not really what I need. I already know this, right? And so that's hard because, again, sometimes the teachers are advanced and maybe this is a little too basic for them. But yes, but they are getting very positive feedback. And then again, they revise and they update.
Wonderful. Does anyone else have any questions? We have a few more minutes. Or comments? Let's see.
How do we get a recorded version? I will leave that to you, Karen.
Yeah, I'll be emailing this out to you, so no worries. That was so much information in a good way, not like, but it was great.
I'm so glad, and I hope it met the needs of this particular, program that you do. I guess the other thing I would want to say is, in addition to, yes, you'll be, Jenny, yes, I'll be sending the PowerPoint as a PowerPoint, so you can work with it if you want to use it with your fellow teachers.
Mhm.
I guess the last thing I'd want to say though is that, not only, wow, there's so much for or what we do in different agencies, but until I worked at the federal government, I never really thought about how there are people working there. You think of all the feds and everything's behind this .gov wall, but you know what? The regular people, I was a regular person when I worked there, and you care and they care and they want you to use this and they want you to work with the material. Sometimes it's not easy to get an individual's name, but just keep trying and you will. And just know that they welcome that if you want to connect with an individual, my experience has been that they welcome that and really take to heart that they serve the public, and in this instance they serve teachers and learners. So please don't hesitate to reach out to them.
Can I be selfish really quick?
Yeah. 2
I'm
minutes.
gonna be very first of all, thank you. I mean, my mind's blown, but I have a question about where can I go? I'm being very selfish, Deborah. Where can I go first? Because there's so much information for working with adult language learners with disabilities, from all the way from autism to dyslexia, the whole spectrum.
So I actually, what I would say to you is to go to links and to look at that, look at the section where it does have learners with disabilities. But I know that it's a good starting point. It's a good starting point, and there's going to be a lot that you're still going to want to see. And I would send you, and I'll put it in the chat, I would send you to the Office of English Language Acquisition.
Okay.
Because a lot of what we're still talking about, ACQUISI, there we go, is still coming from the K-12 space. So I would say first start with Octave, the section on learners with disabilities. And I would say then go to Office of English Language Acquisition. And I'm going to put something else in the chat, Institute for Education Sciences. Are you familiar with this?
I am.
Exactly. IES. So for those of you who are not familiar, IES is the part of the research arm of the federal government, and that's where the research is done and they create reports. But they can be program focused teacher. They're not strategies, but there are research reports, and you will find some good information on adult learners with disabilities there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. I echo Leslie Marshall was saying there's a lot more information than you realize, and I'm with you. I'm so excited because it's been a desire of ours to really highlight adult education more explicitly in Georgia TESOL. So I'm so excited about this information and what you shared with us. Well, it is 6:30, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming, and we really appreciate it. I will be emailing out the video and the PowerPoint slides, so you will have those. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you again in October at our next session, but also at our conference. So thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful seeing everybody. Karen, Dave, Joy.
Thank you so
all of
much.
you.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Dave, I'm not trying to promote